Hello and welcome to another episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Jenny Dietrich.
And Ginny, I've got a bunch of assignments for you today, so stay tuned.
Okay.
Right after this.
Is one of the assignments buying you a birthday gift for your birthday in 6 days?
It is not.
It's not?
I'm not a big fan of gifts, so I'm sure we've talked about this before.
I am a great fan of gifts. So you can send me gifts and send me Chip's gifts as well.
Feel free. Send Ginny my gifts. That there we go. That's my birthday present to myself. I just don't have to deal with them.
Especially if it's wine. If you're sending Chip wine, I will take it. I will fall on my sword and take it for him.
You'd like some wine with your wine, huh? and you can interpret and spell that however you'd like.
That's right. That's right. 6 more days.
So, yeah. That'll be in a whole different decade. So.
Wow. The 40s.
It is what it is.
40s are going to be rough. I'm telling you.
Yeah. Okay. I wish. Anyway, all right. Well, people didn't tune in for that. People tune in for our wisdom and our insight. And one of the questions or one of the complaints that I hear quite often from agency owners, and I suspect you do as well, is that they spend too much. They're just too busy. They're spending too much time on low value stuff. They need to find a way to focus on business development and growing the agency and big picture stuff, and they just don't have the time to do it. And so they sit there and they say, well, how can I get some of this stuff off my plate? And I tell you, I finally have reached the conclusion that it's not how can you figure out what to get off your plate. It's you need to default to it's getting off my plate. So any task that comes to you, you should now, as an agency owner, just say to yourself, who am I delegating this to?
Love that.
And just start that as your default instead of the current default, which is that it comes to you, you're going to do it unless you can find someone else to do it.
Yeah, I think I love that. That's a brilliant idea. So it's, is there anything on this list that only I can do? Which I agree with. My biggest challenge as an agency owner is stuff will come in and I get really busy, like with Zoom calls and, all of the stuff. And then I don't have time to delegate it. And then suddenly the deadline is tomorrow. And so I can't delegate it because I waited too long because I was doing other stuff. And then I'm like, well, I can't delegate this to somebody if the deadline is tomorrow. So then I end up having to do it myself. That's my biggest trap is like, how do I get out of the, you're in meetings all day long and you're getting things, you have a list of things that need to get done. And then you go straight from being in meetings to being in meetings the next day. And it's this cycle that you can't break. So you don't have time to delegate. And I think that one's a big challenge for agency owners as well.
Absolutely. And I think part of that is you need to try to train the people who are sending you things to copy other people on your team, or frankly, just send them to other people on your team to begin with. And
sure.
I think that agency owners have this tendency to want to feel like we're controlling this, we're parceling this out.
Yep.
And I would rather have it go to someone else. And even if it's not done, quite exactly the way I want it to, or quite as well, or maybe they spend some time on something I would not have spent time on, it's still getting out of my purview, and so that's a win. You need to remember that anything you get off of your plate to someone else on your team is a win financially, because you are, or you should be, being paid substantially more than anyone else on your team.
Yeah, I know we've talked about this before, but one of the things I like to do, and I try to do this at least once a month, is create 3 lists. So the one list is what's currently on my task list that only I can do. Nobody else can do this. That will stay on my task list. Then what's on my task list that really I should do, but I don't enjoy it, but if I train somebody, they could take it. That's next. And then what's on my task list that I absolutely should not be doing. So I have a friend who always says, if you're doing administrative work, you're an administrative assistant. So get those things off of your list, because you're not an administrative assistant. You're running an agency, you're running a business. So those kinds of things are really easy to be on that list of what should I absolutely get off this list. So get it off. And to your point, look at your list every day and say, how do I delegate as much of this as possible?
Yeah, I mean, and so I would say to you, if you're having this challenge where you've got things coming at you, and you don't get around to assigning them, my suggestion is to focus on your inbox throughout the day and just get things out of your inbox. And so just even if it's just forwarding it without any comment to someone else on your team, hopefully they can figure out what to do with it. But you probably can
Right.
have time to put 2 or 3 words in there, like
Yeah,
do
yeah,
this
yeah.
now,
Yes.
or tell them no, or whatever. But just focus on getting it out of your inbox. And so if you start thinking about things out and don't just let the stuff build up in your inbox, you just sort of see it and you're like, okay, you go here, you go there. So be a traffic cop for your inbox rather than saying, okay, I need to come back, I need to spend a lot of time with this. And so me personally, what I do is if I can't forward it right off out of my email, then I will just put a star on it and I will come back to it. Usually,
Sure.
usually once a day, I go back through my starred emails to see, what needs to actually be dealt with. But your better bet is to just forward it off to somebody else if you can.
The other thing is if you have a virtual assistant or an administrative assistant or an executive assistant, give them access to your inbox. Like, they can do that too. They can go through and be your traffic cop. There's no reason you have to do that. So they can go through and say, okay, it looks like this needs to go to so and so, and this needs to go to so and so and so and so. The other thing I would say is my sister-in-law is a psychiatrist, and one of the things that she spends most weekends on is notes that from all the conversations she's had with patients throughout the week. And I was with her over the weekend, and I was like, why aren't you doing this like when it's top of mind and you've just met with them? And she's like, because I see patients back to back to back to back to back. And I was like, there has to be a better way. Like, can't you see patients from 1 to 1:45 and then use those last 15 minutes to do your notes? And she was like, actually, that's a really good idea. But then it was the same thing for me. Why do I have to have hour-long meetings? Why can't I have 45-minute late meetings and then use that last 15 minutes to type up notes or delegate or do what I need to do from that meeting and then go to the next? So I think there are some things that you can also learn from other industries and other practices that you can apply pretty well to your own business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, another piece of this in terms of thinking about delegation is that you need to get it out of your head that your clients care who they're having do the work, right? Because I hear this all
Right.
the time from small
Yes.
agencies. Well,
Yes.
they brought me in, they want to hear from me. Well, on
Mm-mm.
some things, a very, very small number of things they want to hear from you
Right.
personally. Most of the time, they just want to get stuff done, right? And
Yep.
so they don't care who's doing it as long as it gets done and gets done well. And so if you get it out of your head that you're the person who needs to be in that meeting, responding to that email, taking on that particular task, just move it along. Frankly,
Mm-hmm.
you probably don't even need to spend as much time editing your team's stuff as you do. I mean, I know a lot of PR agency owners feel like they need to edit everything that goes out the door. You don't. If you do, and it's that vital, you're probably hiring the wrong people to begin with because it shouldn't need that much extra work to get it out the door.
And I know we've had this conversation, but there is nothing more demoralizing than someone on your team producing something and you completely redoing it just because
Yes.
it's not written in your voice, or it's like it's good enough for the client but it's not written in your voice, or it doesn't have, quote unquote, keep up to the standards that you have for your agency, whatever it happens to be, whatever your excuse is. And so what starts to happen is your team starts to submit a shitty first draft because they know you're going to redo it anyway. And so then you're not getting the best work out of them anyway. Stop doing that. That's
Right.
ridiculous. It's demoralizing. Nobody wants to work with somebody like that.
Right. Well, and that's, I mean, that's something that I have struggled with over the years because I love to write and I feel like I'm a pretty good writer. And so if something comes across my desk, I feel compelled to make changes to it. And you need to get out of that mindset. You need
Yep.
to just realize that changes that you make need to be essential. But the other thing I've started doing in the last couple of years is that when I'm given something to edit, I no longer make direct edits to it. I only add comments to the document.
That's what I
And
do
so
too. That's what I do.
and so by doing that, first of all, you're helping to educate whomever is writing
Yep.
that first draft about what it is that you're looking for, because they can't just sit there and accept all changes and move
Right.
along with it and just ignore
Mindlessly. Yep.
everything, right?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Which, I mean, frankly, when I've had people send me track changes, I'll skim through it and no objection. Okay, fine. I'm just done with it. but I don't necessarily internalize what's there. Whereas if there's a comment that says, I need to rework this paragraph to give it more active voice, or I need to stop being so repetitive, or I need to get to the point faster, or whatever, then I'm starting to learn at least what the person who's asking me for this and editing it is looking for. So I now no longer make direct edits. And I think that that's something that more agency owners should consider doing if they can't refrain from really digging into the weeds and making a ton of edits to the document. So that may be a way that you can control yourself, because most PR agency owners are spending a ton of time editing and not necessarily in the most effective way.
Yeah, I actually, what cured me of this is we had a client in 2020 that, even though the content that we were producing was really good, he would rewrite it all of it. And it never changed the meaning. It never changed the outcome. It never changed the messaging. He just would rewrite it and use, he would write like Stephen King, where he used 16 words instead of one. And so it didn't change anything. It just made it longer and more verbose is all he was doing. And it was so demoralizing to me and my team, because we were like, first of all, making it for more verbose doesn't help. And secondly, like, why do you have us if you're going to do this? And that's what changed it for me, because I realized how awful it made me feel when he was doing that to my content. And I realized I was doing that to my team. So I was like, no more. I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was doing that. I'm not doing it anymore. And I don't.
Right. And even if you take my approach of going to comments, still ask yourself, is it an actual necessary change?
Right.
Does it actually make it substantially better, or does it avoid some meaningful problem? And if it doesn't, you can probably just ignore it, because all of us have things that we'd like to change. I mean, heck, I will see my own writing from 2 weeks ago and be like, oh, I actually like to say it this way, or something like that. I mean, my lawyer, I frequently had conversations with him, because he would go ahead and he would re-edit documents that he had sent me years before, and I'd been using, like contracts and that kind of stuff. I'd be like, I'm not paying you to edit your own stuff. I sent it to you to look at what the client asked for to be changed in it, not to change your own stuff that you already wrote, particularly when it doesn't have any real effect other than, it keeps some lawyer somewhere happy because, it's written more artfully for the, whatever. Doesn't matter. So focus on what is absolutely necessary. And this is true not just whether it's editing, but anything else. If you're being asked for feedback on a plan, if you want to change something in that plan, make sure that it actually makes a difference. Don't say, well, you should do that. Really, does it make it substantially better? If not, embrace what your team is doing. If you've got a situation where you're like, well, I'm the only other person who can review this document, because this person reports to me, well, maybe they can have a peer edit it to look for typos and things like that, so that they've got someone with fresh eyes taking a look at it. You don't need to be the one doing that.
No.
So really, you've got to find ways to default to delegation in all of these things, because the more that you get wrapped up in trying to figure out what you can delegate, you're going to lose the plot, and you're not going to be able to get enough things off of your plate for it to be meaningful and to give you the time that you need and you want in order to be happy with what you're doing and build something that you're happy to own.
Yeah, and it's, we've talked about improving culture and morale and all of that. And when you do things like that, it demonstrates that you trust your team. And you've hired grown-ups who are experts, who have an expertise in their field. Otherwise, they wouldn't be working with you. They know what they're doing. Don't push them down and put your thumb on top of them because you want to change, you have pet peeves, or you want everything written in your voice. That's not the point. The point is to build an agency where people are thriving and happy to be there because you trust them to do their jobs.
Right. And people will perform better once they realize that they are trusted. And for some, it's going to take some effort, because you will have employees. I'm sure you and I have both had them over the years who, want to ask you lots of questions, and they're, maybe they're not as confident in their own work as they should be. And so they're asking for more feedback than they absolutely need to be asking for. Now, there's a balancing act here, because you don't want to just shut someone off and make them feel like they're off on an island on their own. So you need to continue to provide that mentorship, that coaching, that feedback, and all of that kind of thing. But you also need to help them understand that you trust them to get the job done. and that they
Right.
need to do a better job of figuring out when they need to come to you and not just come to you on everything for feedback,
Yep.
approval, ask
Yep.
questions,
Yep.
etc.
Yep.
And so a good way to do that is if someone comes to you is to ask them, if they say, oh, well, what do you think we should do about this? Turn it around. What do you think we should do?
What do you
Right.
think? Uh-huh.
And try to get them talking first, and hopefully what they come up with is a good idea and you can say, yep, run with it, and that helps to build their confidence. And if it's not exactly the right idea and the right approach, be gentle about it and
Yeah.
say, well, yes, but right. Yes, but what if we just modified it slightly, even if that slightly is really 180 degrees opposite? Make them feel like you're building off of their idea. It will really help in giving you the ability to delegate more, get things off of your plate.
I'm laughing because when you said, what do you think? Every single one of my team and our clients for listening to this just groaned when you said that, because that's what I say all the time.
Yep.
What do you think? And at first people are like, is this a trap? And then they realize that if they start coming to you with, okay, I have this challenge and here's what I think I'm going to do, all of a sudden it turns things around. So we have a client right now where he will text me, the chief of corporate communications will text me and be like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And I'll say, well, what do you think? And he's like, I don't know. That's why I'm asking you. But I always walk him through, and my team the team that's working on this client with me will laugh because they're like, yep, been there, understand,
Yep.
as they're watching him. But that's what I'm doing, is I'm helping him understand that, hey, he's a chief of corporate communications. He knows what he's doing. He has an expertise, but he's in his previous job was beat down pretty badly. So he's lost his confidence. And so I'm helping to rebuild that confidence by just saying, like, you know what you're doing. You don't need me to tell you what to do. You know exactly what you're doing. So I just keep asking that over and over and over again. And it takes some practice from your perspective, because our automatic response is always to give the answer that we think, right, or that we want them to have. So it takes some practice. You have to actually self-talk and say, I'm not going to answer this. I'm going to ask them what they think. It takes a lot of dedication and motivation to do that, discipline to do that. So keep that in mind. And there's one of my clients specifically listening. She's laughing right now because I say this to her all the time. She's like, okay, I know you're going to ask me, what do I think? Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
And so then you say, and so what do you think?
And so what do you think?
But the better that you get at delegating and deflecting and all of these things, the less dependent people are on you
That's right.
personally.
Yep.
And
Yep.
you don't want either your employees or your clients to truly be dependent upon you. You want them to depend on you, but not be dependent upon you. And it is a subtle difference, but an important one, because to the extent that either of those groups of people are dependent on you, you will not be able to control your own day. You will not be able to figure out how to invest your time most wisely, because you will be taking so much incoming communication on things that are just not worth your time.
Right.
That it will bog you down.
Right.
So you need
Yeah.
to learn how to delegate, how to deflect, how to get other people involved and engaged and running with the ball, so that you can provide that high level guidance, that strategic insight, the things that you as the agency owner are able to do above and beyond the rest of your team. That's where your value lies, not in doing the day to day.
Yeah. And like I said, maybe you start once a week and you create your 3 lists. Maybe you do it on Sunday night or Friday evening before you shut down for the weekend, if you shut down for the weekend, and say, okay, next week I need to do this, this, and this. Which list does it belong on? Does it belong on the list that only I can do? Does it belong on the list that someone else can do but needs training? Or does it belong on the list that I absolutely should not be doing this and has to be delegated right this minute? And then get it off your list before Monday.
Right. And default to putting in that delegate column, right? You
Yes.
have to find an
Yes.
argument for
Yes.
why you should move it out of that column. It needs to be a strong argument. So don't, I would say, don't even sit there and try to figure out which bucket it goes in. Put it in the delegate bucket. And only when you realize there's no way I can do that, only then do you look at the other buckets to put it into. Because if you don't, I just really have become convinced that agency owners need to just change their default mindset. Because I think the problem is that they get bogged down in trying to figure out what they can delegate, as opposed to just saying pretty much all of this can be delegated. right? I mean,
Yep.
most of what you do
Yep.
could be delegated. It may not be
Yep.
able to be done quite as well, and you just needed to figure out which of those it's most important to keep on your plate versus sending out to someone else on your team.
Yep. Yeah.
Or sending to
I
the
mean,
circular file, frankly, because you probably get a bunch of things that don't really need anybody to focus on them. You can find a way to.
yeah. I mean, I'm guilty of it too. There are
Work around.
definitely things on my list that need to be delegated.
Well, there you go. Just don't delegate them to me. I've got enough on my list already. So,
All right.
but in any case, on that note, I'm going to delegate the end of this show. No, I don't have anything to delegate. The end
Oh,
of the show to,
jeez.
but yeah, I thought I'd be able to come up with something. I'm going to
No.
delegate the editing of this to Jen, but I already do that, so
I
that's
like
not
it.
new. So, anyway, with that, I'm Chip Griffin,
I'm Jenny Beasley.
and it depends.